Hey everybody, we'll be starting very shortly here. Welcome to another episode of Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. We have a great show tonight. We have the great Minnesota Senator from what I've just learned is SD28, I thought it was 30. Okay, Mark Koran. Did I say that right, Mr. Koran? And we're going to be talking all things election. But as always, we'd love to hear what you guys have to say, so please comment below the video. We'll put your comments on screen. And if you don't mind giving us a share right now to help spread the word, we would appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, guys, about 30 seconds. Okie doke, guys. You can take it away whenever you are ready.
Welcome to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. I am AK Kamara.
And I'm Jai Hansen.
How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. You know, I'm doing well considering, how things went here in Minnesota last Tuesday. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the share button with all your friends and your family. We are Black and Blue Podcast. We're really about having conversations about the things, the people, the institutions that get beat up either by the mainstream media, by local media, really by anyone. And today's episode is going to be about how Minnesotans got beat up. They were hoping for a change in the way that things had been going in this.
Look, I want to know how many bets you lost on election night. I mean,
lost.
You're paying
one.
out, right?
I lost one, and then I won one, which you told me that I won the one. So I didn't lose too much, and I actually made good on my bet already. I actually brought. I'll just say it. So me and Jamar from Black Republican, Black Democrat, we had a bet like 6 months ago, and I said that Jensen would win, and he said that Walz would win, and so I already made good on that, and we actually went to a Brazilian steakhouse.
Now, was that with a Groupon, or was that?
I tried to do a Groupon, and I actually messed it all up. Actually, so no, it was good, but in Minnesota. Things didn't go the way that we hoped they would go. And today's episode, what we want to do is break down some of that. So one of the first things is that we lost control of the Senate. And so our producer is going to pull up the first image here. Minnesota now has a trifecta, meaning that the governor, remained in Democrat hands with Tim Walz. The state house remained in DFL control, and Republicans lost the control of the Senate. So now the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. And so, that's on its surface, it feels like we lost a lot, right? That's what it feels like, that we lost a lot.
Yeah.
Because it felt like there was this momentum in which there was going to be a red tsunami. Anyone that follows me on my social, I've been sharing articles about the red tsunami that's coming based off of Biden's approval rating and looking at historical midterms where you have a really bad approval rating for the sitting party, and that didn't happen in Minnesota. We didn't get wiped out, and I wouldn't call it a blue wave that happened in Minnesota, but there was enough flipping and then continuing with the status quo that happened. So that's kind of where it is now. When me and you met on election night, we were hoping to have a victory night. It was very somber. First time for you. What was that like, man?
It was disappointing as far as from a law enforcement perspective. Going with the public safety stance and seeing the candidates that we had. As far as Jim Schultz or Scott Jensen for statewide offices that really championed for public safety. So I had high hopes for that. I think people were fed up with the crime, and maybe we haven't hit the spot we need to yet, unfortunately. So I'm curious to see what happens next, and our guest today will help us figure out the route to go.
Yeah, so I think a lot of soul searching happens whenever you don't perform, you underperform like we did in Minnesota. And especially when you kind of go against what other states were doing, like, Florida, which was insane. DeSantis winning by 20 points down there. And so today we have Senator Mark Koran. He represents both Isanti and Chisago?
Isanti and Chisago.
And Chisago counties. And it used to be Senate District 32, and there's an error. It's now Senate District 28. But welcome to the show, Senator Koran.
Yeah.
We wanted to bring you on.
Thanks for coming on.
You're a guy that I've met in the past, and you care about politics more than outside of your district. Like, you care about the brand.
I'm afflicted with paying attention, which means you become very frustrated. And so I think you embrace your afflictions, right? You're either paying attention or you're not. Embrace them. You're more likely to speak out and be wary. You could end up here. And so the only thing I can tell you, too, is most of us never plan to be here.
Sure.
You pay attention, you show up. I've always been about accountability and transparency. My entire career has brought in within government and around government. This will be 40 years April. And
oh, really?
In my career, yeah.
Okay.
And so I always had a job in the real world, but I spent quite a few years at the Minnesota Department of Revenue. And so understanding government and then really about transparency and accountability. It's somewhere complicated than that. But I can tell you the only way you become far more frustrated than just somebody activist on the outside is get elected. Yeah. And then you get to see, you get more access to more information, and you get to have a voice and a vote, and you get to go out and help educate. And yeah, I'm kind of, you're all in. I have 7 grandchildren. I want them to have the best opportunities that I had in the state of Minnesota. We still live in the greatest state in the country, but we also have all of the threats. We mirror Congress, right, in almost every way.
Sure.
All the threats that we have against us, and every movement you see, which may seem radical in many cases, are all here. They're all grounded right here. Our politics we're still 50-50 state, believe it or not. When you look at the change that we just had, we lost the Senate 150 votes.
Yeah,
right?
it was that close.
Yeah.
One race, 150 votes. The House is probably less than 2,000 votes that we lost the majority there. So no mandate, and now we must govern, and hopefully govern for what's best for Minnesota. It's a new role. I've been lucky in the 6 years I've served; they've all been in the majority, and but I'm encouraged by the Senate Majority Leader on the Democrat side, Carrie Dietzig, common sense person. She wants what's good for Minnesota. And with a 1-seat majority, one seat, it's a precarious position to be in. We know we were in it for almost 6 years. I think that it will bring some moderation relative to some of the things people fear the most. I hope it brings moderation. We're going to do everything we can to try and make sure that happens. But that's the best we could hope for, in a losing, in the worst case scenario. So, because 34 is really hard, and to keep people united, I don't think people have any idea what work our caucus went through. We probably operated uniquely in the Republican Senate than any of the other caucuses. Everybody gets a voice. We have to move together, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of compromise in your own caucus, and then great leadership. And we did that. We did that, and it was and I think that's why we were very successful. Elections are elections, and I think with redistricting, not knowing what do those new districts look like. Some were more friendly to Republicans. Others were much more competitive. You see in Roger Chamberlain district, or Jim Abler. Couldn't think of 2 better people to be in a really, really competitive district. But some of that's redistricting, right? There's there's a variety of things that happen out there, but we're ready to govern. We got a few things to see how the leadership sets up the new rules and what that looks like. But I think they picked the best majority leader on the Democrat side that we could have hoped for, which I think will bring some common sense and some moderation.
Yeah, I want to get to that point in a second too, but I wanted to get kind of your thoughts. Producer, we got pictures 2 and 3. I think this is important to put in perspective. So in 2018, which when we're trying to measure elections versus elections, we're going to look at a midterm. Now, 2018 was a little bit different because there was a U.S. Senate race, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, does a U.S. Senate race pull up more people than just a governor? Maybe. But what I find probably most interesting, a couple of different metrics. So maybe it's pictures.
I'll get 2 as well, but yeah. It was.
So basically, to your point, some people felt like the expectations were so high that there'd be this red tsunami. But when you actually look, most of the House districts across the country shifted right? So it's like the expectations were so high that we would just demolish. And yes, it was an odd year, but Republicans did make advances across the country. Now, Minnesota's a little bit different, but I think that's it. To speak to that point, it doesn't mean all is lost and that we have to slam the brakes on everything we've been doing and radically change our positions. We have to be better organized and some things like that. So Minnesota was a little bit different, but I know, Jai.
Well, yeah, I just had a question as far as to your point, Senator. How confident were you leading up to election night? As far as you're talking about the red wave. Or AK is
red tsunami.
Tsunami.
I hate the talk of the red tsunami or that all of that talk. Right. I think we're still right on the issues. Right. Crime. Right. Mm-hmm. Public safety crime. The economy, number one, and and schools. I mean, I think that when the exit polls still show those are top priorities.
Yeah.
But it really goes to turnout and the bombardment of messaging. Right. So the abortion issue came up. And could we have had a better message for Minnesota? Yeah, I think when the Supreme Court leak came out, we knew that decision was coming. Yeah. So a better unified message from the very beginning probably could have been more helpful. Would it have changed it? I'm not sure. Would it? When you bombard it and you try and convince everybody to take away rights and that that we're in an extremist position versus those that did vote for a very extreme position of abortion up to birth, and most don't agree with that. And so when you really get down to it, is about the value of life, and that's really going to come. We have to convince people to value life.
Yeah. Well, looking back on it internally during the campaign cycle, was there at any point you felt that the abortion issue, that the Minnesota GOP needed to regroup on that issue, or that you were losing more ground because of that issue?
I think it went silent in many cases, or that I think the position was, and not a winning position, of trying to be silent, right? That, hey, it isn't, right? The Supreme Court, or in Minnesota, it had been adjudicated. So I think the Supreme Court ruling is proper, because it is a states' rights issue. And so, but Minnesota is one of the unique states that actually has had it adjudicated at a Supreme Court level, and to protect that right. And would we like to see more life preserved? Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And there's many ways to protect life, right? Yeah. One, first off, prevention of pregnancy, and I think those things are important. But when you look at the bombardment and the messaging out there that there's we could take away every one of your rights, and then the lies about, well, then we're going to go next into some other category, and then the tie or the tie into the threat of we're here to take away democracy. I would think every single claim about the threat to democracy is one that is then imposed on Republicans that Democrats were actually in the process of, right? When you look about the threats, from free speech, right? You look at the suppression and the impact on elections by those trying to take away and threaten democracy. Yeah. It's a projection onto others in what you're doing, and we've seen that continue. And then, but when you look at the bombardment of 10 being outspent 10-21, did you see any ads? People, we get beat up all the time. Why did you have more ads, right?
If there's not money coming in, you can't make things come out of there.
Well, what was the money? AK, do you remember what the money was on that?
It was close. So I believe total expenditures, if you combine what was raised statewide along with outside expenditures, I want to say the DFL had somewhere close to almost $60 million that was put into Minnesota, and Republicans were like 2.5
Right,
million.
right.
Like,
So but that's consistent, and you're only tracking the parts that are required to be recorded.
sure,
Right.
sure.
So you add outside of that. Pick every single media outlet, every social
Yeah,
media
no,
outlet.
of course.
It would dwarf the hard dollars that are actually reported, right?
Yeah.
And the influence that it has. And it is literally one way.
Yeah.
And think about that. They should have to file a campaign finance report for in-kind donations.
Is that something that you think would ever have legs to come, or is this something that we just have to hope that we could have legislation if we can?
I don't think you're going to legislate media, right? I mean, it's free speech, but that media literally is. Think about the Governor Wall or the Governor Walz non-debate debate.
Mm-hmm.
So Jensen's on a stage by himself. Did the debate change? It was the media, right?
Yeah,
They're the
sure.
mouthpiece for the governor.
Sure.
In every way, shape, and form. I mean, you guys don't see it. We participate in press conferences all the time, and it literally is. Did you get the questions from the Walz administration up front, or do you just
Sure.
make them up?
Sure.
Very, very few questions without a predetermined message, right? It's like the attorney, right? They don't care what your answer is. They're going to make a statement. And so the condescension in the statements and the aggressiveness on one side versus the other, I mean, it's a party on the other side. But was that debate, would it have changed if Walz would have shown up? No. The media sat there. Did they make one question? Did they? You would think that they may have, had a comment. Just think if Governor Walz is here, we'd actually be able to get his opinion.
Sure.
But he's not here, so we'll give you his opinion for us. And for the listeners.
So to that point, so it's actually pictures 4 and 5 producer. I have my numbers mixed up. I just think it's important to stress this, to put these things in perspective, that things are not as far apart as people sometimes feel. And I think to your point, what matters more to be able to close this gap, because there is a gap. Like let's be very, very candid. The last time that Republicans were able to get more votes than Democrats was 2006 on a statewide, whether that's presidential election. Now, presidential Minnesota hasn't gone Republican since 72 or something like that.
Richard Nixon.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's been a very, very long time. But the reason why I think this is important is that so this is 2018, right? So if you look at the total vote totals, Walz got 1.39 million. Jeff Johnson got 1.097. And then if you look at 2022, Walz actually got less. He had like I think he had like 70,000 less. And actually Jensen was able to pick up another, about another 23,000, right? So the point is Jensen performed better in 2022 than Johnson did in 2018, and Walz actually underperformed. And so what that means to me is that this is a much larger point that ties into what you just said. When you have the media apparatus and you have, well, just lack of a better term, cultural institutions that are already pushing left of center ideas and beliefs and are more favorable.
With our money, by the way.
With our money, but the only way to push back against that is we actually have to have cultural changes at the grassroots, which is something that I know that you are very familiar with. So I kind of want to just have this as an understanding and a premise that it wasn't this giant shellacking. There was gains from the right, more than from the left. Republicans had gains. It's just it wasn't enough. So when we say, well, how do we change that? Starts at the grassroots, and me and you have talked offline, but what are some ideas of things that you think need to happen at a fundamental level to get the ability to have a bigger impact on culture?
Let's first you talked about 2006, right? The last time we had the signal. The one thing that's consistent from 2006 till today, we're still using the same technology and philosophy.
Sure.
Democrats haven't. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars in technologies. Look at a Dean Phillips campaign finance report. He's probably got no less than 15 separate companies, and most of them are to communicate with very segmented portions of the population. And that doesn't include Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You look at our congressional candidates, they might have 4 entries in that category. A general consultant, right? Some media, and the media is going to be, right, some digital media campaign, and it's going to be Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck are we doing?
Sure.
And by the way, they're all sworn enemies to us.
Sure.
And so we haven't changed anything. So what are we going to do? So how do we mobilize people, and how do we start to build out a message or use technology to actually deliver our message in a more meaningful manner? And so I'm a big fan. I think technologies, I think some people hope that a media company will suddenly appear and to come to our rescue. It's not.
It's not going to happen, man.
But technologies have been developed. The Democrats have their fourth election cycle utilizing peer-to-peer technologies.
Sure.
Peer-to-peer technologies allows you to communicate very effectively, and it's in your friend's voice, not us as a campaign voice. So 4 years. Think about building on 4 election cycles, 8 years, building on year over year, getting people used to adaptation of that technology, getting trusted information from somebody you trust, not any political candidate, right, at the door or otherwise. And the technology, if you look at just from a basic level, a direct peer-to-peer, you and your peer, that person's twice likely to receive the message favorably and act upon it. Mm-hmm. That's better than twice as likely than the candidate at the door.
So when you say peer-to-peer, what do you mean?
So utilizing technologies, right? There's applications that have been developed out there. In the Democrat side, Tuesday Company is one of them. They have multiple ones, and we have one in Minnesota. It's actually developed in Minnesota. It's called Swipe Red.
Yeah.
And so it allows a campaign to participate. The campaign procures the messages, right? And you write it in a variety of formats. And then anybody who downloads the application, you load your contacts, and it allows you to it facilitates you to be able to simply share those messages with your contacts in your voice.
Interesting.
Because it's not coming. Have you become bombarded lately in this election cycle with texting and Facebook messaging and emails? Everybody just hits delete because it comes from a campaign.
Sure.
But when it comes from somebody you know, you're much more likely to see it. Then you get into younger populations, 4 to 5 times more likely. You get into minority populations, 7 to 8 times more likely to review that message and act upon it.
So how do you get the party on board with this, to have that same philosophy and that mentality that you have that is motivating to get the younger voters out there?
Get all voters out there and mobilize our force. I truly believe we have them. We just have not done anything. There's many things that we could do better. But in that case, I think it has to be one, throughout our party apparatus. MNGOP must adopt this technology, right? But I got to tell you, neither of our caucuses have either, the Senate or the House. They would, we're good in technology. We know what we're doing. You little senators, go sit down and leave the campaigning to the big boys. But without adapting or trying that technology, we're destined to continue this process. We have the people out there, and who's more likely? We've won in participation, right? Just to get out the vote. This is a technology that it's not an election technology. It's what we must adapt for year-round communication, education. So you're the trusted source of validated information that can be shared with, your friends and family, and your contacts. Think about the ability to, in our database, AK, we get walkbooks. We got a variety of data points. We don't have much as far as we got a pro-life and a pro-Second Amendment.
Sure. Yeah.
Think about being able to have that tool and to be able to collect, so you could do some more sophisticated technology. Was it Trafalgar who uses the neighbor polling? Because you're less likely to give up your own opinion, but you sure as heck will give up your neighbors pretty freely. Yeah. Think about being able to collect those data points from everybody you know in the contact database and have that retained for use in specializing a messaging. Because you're going to be more likely to know their needs better than they're ever going to give up in a survey or call.
Sure. I think that's a fair way to look at it.
That technology is available today. And so then you think about get out the vote and all of the thinking about get out the vote and you roll into the campaign. The application today is now being rolled in integration into the RNC database. Think about the power that you might have in a very short manner to be able to look in your contacts and run through the database that will tell you who's registered to vote and who's not.
Sure.
We don't get that today as a candidate.
So, I 100% agree with you. I'm on board with what you're saying about, we have to adapt our technology. I still think that there is a step before that. And here's what I mean is that you could, MNGOP, let's say, Senate caucus, House caucus, that a bunch of money comes pouring in from some benefactor, and boom, we have the technology. But if there's nobody from the groups that we want to be able to get the buy-in from the younger folks, right, that are using it, it's a larger haul to ask. I think that you have to make an impact on honestly, like, this word sounds so stupid when I say it over and over again, but on the culture. And what I mean by that, just to be clear, is that when it comes to what do people find acceptable and what do people find like something that they have a agreement with, or at least they don't have a disagreement. Right now, the culture in Minnesota is that Republicans are bad. That's what the culture feels. If you are outside, basically, I should say inside the 494, 694, right? Republicans are bad. That's what the culture dictates. You go up to northern Minnesota, southern Minnesota, western Minnesota, and Republicans are cool, right? Like, that's whatever, Trump country, MAGA country, whatever you want to call it. These are folks that understand what it means to be a Republican, but we know that the demographics are significantly older than the demographics here. So when I say cultural, some of the things that you and I talked about is, we have to have an actual, door knocking, canvassing apparatus. Why do you think that has fallen away, or what do you think we can do to kind of bring that back?
I think one the great thing we saw in 2021, right, January, we saw a lot of people come out in 2016, right, for President Trump drawing more people. He drew more people in 2020. 2021, people woke up after the election and went, what the heck just happened? And so think about I chaired a couple conventions and I attended a bunch of them. I called my wife and I said, we've got a problem that we've never had to worry about before, is that we're literally going to have to think about daycare. Because I think the transformation is starting to occur. So many more young people with families. I was at I think it's SD33, and there's 25 kids running around at a convention. It's packed. So there's a fresh new group. First, we have to retain them, right? I met with so many of them, and they talk about they're new. They're 35, 40, never done a thing politically, never. And so they're there today. So we've got to capture them. We have to make sure and continue to provide education to them. I think overall, what have we got, 121 BPOUs? I think what we have is we've got generational dysfunction in many of them. They don't even know what the true opportunity is.
Sure.
And part of that is when we look at, let's go back to the basic level, scope and our limited scope over the last 40 years. We've only focused on federal and state offices. On any election cycle, that's 10, 11, 12, depending whether it's presidential and the cycle of our U.S. Senate seats. In my Senate district alone, 168 elected people.
Oh, really?
168. We focus on 10.
Wow.
So that's where the power is, right? And so the opposition, the Democrats, have mobilized at every level. Every single elected office, they're bringing their campaign apparatus to. We must do the same. Now, there's been great change as well. Every dialogue, every congressman, everybody in our who shares our beliefs says it's all about local politics. It's where the true power is gained. It's where all bad ideas are incubated. It is. And so when you add really what that scope is, if we're going to focus on 10, you look at the percentage of people or what that really reflects. And in 168 positions, or elected positions in my Senate district, when you add, those are the electeds, then you think about all of the boards, right, from Parks and Recs, planning and zoning, you name it. That's another almost 400 people out of an election cycle. 400 more people. Well, guess who they appoint? People who share their beliefs.
Sure.
Guess who they hire? People who share their beliefs. And so they're permanent. So when you look at the amount of influence that we willingly don't even participate in, we don't even participate in 10% of the elections. And so That's to me where the focus has to start. MNGOP must adapt. In this next cycle, they're going to elect a new chair, and we must change the Constitution that says all elected offices, and then build our apparatus. Look at what we've done in school boards. Parents have woken up. We had great success. There was a lot of success and a lot of change on people finally participating in municipal level government. Now we need to provide the apparatus so we ensure that those seats in a conservative district reflect our values and to get people to participate. And it's happening. We need to make sure that we institutionalize that everything's in scope, and then put in the procedural processes to allow and to go out, validate everybody who's currently serving in office, see who's registered or not registered, but identified as a Republican. Get out there and validate. Are they acting in those belief systems? And then how do we support those that share our beliefs, and how do we recruit? I think at the state party level, when we think about functional groups, right, it's all volunteers. But if I had to do one, which I've proposed before, I would put a 10-member team on local elections, municipal elections. We should try to provide with each BPOU level your ballot 2 years in advance.
Sure.
We know who's up. We should be doing voter ID on every one of them. We should be the support mechanism for anybody who shares our values, and where we have those people in place, about vetting who they're going to appoint to make sure that we've done voter ID on them. And to be that key resource, we could bring thousands of boots on the ground in the political apparatus. One, making sure people reflect and determine our quality of life in our backyard, but also really is where the power has been gained to allow the Democrats to operate in the manner they are today.
Senator, one thing that's interesting to me, and I want to get your view on it. AK talked about the 494, 694 corridor, and inside of that, Republicans are bad, and outside of it, Republicans are cool. You grew up in the city, right?
I'm a frog towner, man.
So a lot of people probably don't know that about you, that you're a city boy, right?
Yep.
We touched on that a little bit before, how you can connect with urban areas. One thing I was happy to see with this election cycle, Scott Jensen, Matt Burke, last weekend before the election, they're out in the urban areas.
Yep.
And for a Republican candidate, that's pretty different to see that. How do you touch on that? We have AK here, who's a U of M grad. We got a whole bunch of kids.
I won't hold that against. I like them anyways. So.
We got a whole bunch of kids and young voters that might not agree on a lot of the GOP standpoints, but they are getting carjacked. They are getting jumped. They're worried about taking the light rail. How do we focus on them and rally that base, that younger base in the metro area to start carrying the messaging? Because I think you're right with how you connect with outstate Minnesota in doing that. But you're a city guy.
And so I've done it. It's been the biggest pleasure I had is serving in the caucus. We all bring unique backgrounds, but now I think I don't know that we have anybody left. Was Dan Hall, who was raised in Minneapolis, who's actually been born and raised in there. And cultures change every 20 miles. People don't think they do, but they really do. Growing up in that environment, it gives you a little bit ability to resonate with everybody who else has grown up there. I've done. Any candidates locally, Minneapolis, St. Paul, any Republican steps up on the dotted line to go and try to help them every way, shape, and form to provide access to somebody who's currently serving. We're not special, right? People forget, just you get elected, you think that's title matters. I respect the hell out of the title, but we're just your neighbor. We are. And so you just got to make sure that people remember, after we're elected, just your neighbor. And to go and provide that support for anybody who puts their name on the dotted line, educate, help, and motivate and inform them, and to reward their volunteers. Somebody who shows up that's never done anything, they don't get access to that because they've been told all these horrible things. You go, because the other side will go into that same minority population, say, hey, they're going to deport you.
Sure.
Let's just lead right out. We're going to deport you. You have legal status? Yeah. Oh, they'll still deport you. It's the blatant lies, and so breaking into that has been really hard. I think some of the other technologies could help us get there, but it can't be an election cycle process. It has to be continuous, ongoing, and bust the doors down on the churches and every population, vast majority population, I don't care who it is. When you look at them, they share our values. Family belief, right? Pro-life, family, hardworking, right? They don't want anybody screwing around with their children in school.
Yep.
They want them to get great education. That's it. So when you look at that, we share all of our values. But being able to break down those barriers is really hard, and it needs a concerted effort. There aren't many of us that can do it because we serve great people, right? But if they've never lived there, never done it. Actually, I go Senator Pratt all the time. He's always going working out in the Asian community, and it's good. But it's really turning that from an apparatus and bringing them in nonstop. And make it a conservative effort to just go out and have that conversation.
And not in an election year.
Oh, no, nonstop. Yeah.
Like right now, right? Like so when you talk about these technologies being used, this is, again, from where I come talking about this, is we pay so much lip service saying that these are the things that we want to do. And for years, and a previous chair of the MNGOP, and the chair before that chair, I remember having these conversations because, MNGOP has affiliate groups, right? And it's like there's so many things that we talk about, here's what we're going to do, but a lot of it does come down final to dollars. But there's something that I hate that excuse. I know it's a reality that money does matter, but I also think that if you don't go and actively try and find people that reflect the values of that district, that are tired of hearing what the current, standard operating procedure of the Democrats in the area is, and they're tired of it, you have to find them, you have to get them plugged in, connected, and you have to start doing that now because they're the ones that have the passion, right? Yeah. So like when Jensen and Burke went over to South Minneapolis and went over to North Minneapolis, there were people that showed up. I know Laverne Turner, he's been active with the Republican Party for a few years. That man knows other people that are connected within
Laverne's
these
the man,
right? And so it's like we need to empower people like Laverne that knows people in the community that share those values, and we need to start getting that apparatus out to getting people to our side and saying like, here's the things that we believe in, here's what our values are, and then how do you think that plays, and then on top of that, what are you hearing from the people? And I think if we start doing that now, maybe we only gain 5 percentage points in the next election, but 5 percentage points would have made us win. 5% of these highly populated, dense areas would have pushed.
It matters, and when you think about it, it's really about just sitting down and having the conversation, right? And just getting to know you on the personal level, because we are just basic humans, and we do share. It's just having that open conversation, which is not the most difficult for me. It's a blast. They've been shielded from us in many ways, and so they just get this narrative. They really think we're bad people with terrible ideas.
Sure, yeah.
We may have different ideas, but I'm telling you, I've never met anybody where we literally don't share 85%.
Right after you talk to him. So my brother actually asked a question. My brother is super long-winded, just like me. So he's saying, are you saying in fact,
weird
that there's an issue when conservative Minnesota constituents then the voting polls reflect, but that aren't aware of who to vote for, whether or not they should vote, or is an issue of messaging which doesn't quite resonate with enough citizens whom are not political but suffer from political exhaustion?
That's a great question.
Lethargic.
Good question.
I think, it's a great question. I think the answer is yes to all of the above. Yeah. But the other part, I think it really goes to, you talked about in those areas, we got to recruit them as candidates.
Sure.
And I went to, I think the one I had fun at was Shiloh when he ran for Congress. We were at his kickoff. So 800 people showed up. A congressman had 800 people show up to a kickoff meeting. So the energy's there, but it's capturing him. But I looked at there and said, oh, there's a candidate. Everybody got up and spoke. They love this country. And a lot of military vets, and because their father served, and you go, oh, there's a candidate, there's a candidate, there's a candidate, and I think so. That's an effort. We need more of those candidates to step up and run and empower them and mobilize them. But I think the reality too is we also have to really evaluate how we pick our candidates.
Sure.
So I'm not willing to give up the caucus process because I need to know people that. I think we need to look at the primary people that organize in a primary manner. do we end up with better candidates that reflect and share our values, but are the most electable for that district? Again, because the cultures change.
Yeah.
You and I know the people who show up are very dedicated. We're nothing without those volunteers.
Right.
But it's not a broad subsection of even any political district. And so people say, oh, there's more extreme. There could be more single issue voters. It's only because nobody else shows up.
Sure.
I'd rebrand caucus.
right.
I wouldn't even call it caucus.
Senator, I see a question out there right now. It says, as a centrist who is alienated by the woke end of the left, I'd be coming right if the conservatives could show their compassionate side a little more. Yeah. I talk to so many people who agree. We feel we're without a party. Does the Minnesota GOP ever talk about appealing to that group?
So I think people, again, the ability to deliver the message or anybody even carrying our message, when you look at the things that we do, I serve on Health and Human Services, okay? We have done nothing but fight like mad to preserve those things that affect our children, disabled, and our elderly. And you want to talk about a really, really hard process to look at what we're doing. When government is ineffective and it wastes our money, I think it's the theft of our labor, right? But when that same poor outcome is in those areas where it is our kids are disabled and elderly, I can show you great harm and great neglect. And it's sad. I mean, very, very sad. We have exclusively been the only ones fighting for that battle. Nobody's ever heard of that. The Walz administration would cut nursing homes significantly. Heck, even in the last budget cycle, we don't normally, in 2022, we already had a budget. But when you look at critical need, we're ready to spend $1 billion for group homes, group homes, which are for disabled, and our nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and PCAs, personal care attendants. There are people that, if the PCA doesn't show up, they don't get out of bed for the day. Where they're battling it. And the administration says today, well, we're comfortable. Well, we're committed. We'll try to make it better someday in the future. When you see it, I know I can show you cases where people have died. I can show you cases where we put people into a group home and we've tied their hands with just crappy policy that leads to harm, neglect of the employees who work in that environment, to employees who are raped, injured. The workers' comp rates, or the number of people on it, are horrible. We've been the only ones working to fight and stop that.
Well, see, this is what needs to get out more. I don't think people understand that.
So the Democrat solution for this $1 billion, and it literally is critical need. I'm a conservative. I want to make sure at the end of the day you get great value for money, and government's serving its role. There's vital roles to serve. But in that area, they said, we're willing to do $450 million, but we'd rather have $500 million also go to create a whole bunch of nonprofits that feel good and rarely deliver a single thing and improve benefit. Right. And so that goes to that message. And people think that, again, nobody's here for the money. You're here for pure passion. And that's one that pisses me off, frankly, and makes me sad, that I get to see it every day and that I can't there's ways I know how we can transform the workforce to make them accountable. So at the end of the day, give a crap what we are, Republican or Democrat, that we can prove you're getting great value. Because there's no one here can tell you what the heck you pay collectively in taxes. Nobody knows. They just think the system's broken and I pay too much. Most have no idea. I would also argue the system's not broken. It's designed to produce the poor results we get. Because
that's interesting. Right? Yeah. It's like a self-eating process. Like, this is the problem. No, in my opinion.
I'd correct. It's not self. It's human nature, right? There's a lot of great people. It's a process that has no naturally occurring corrective action for when it gets its job wrong.
Right.
And in fact, it has a perverse incentive to reward itself for poor outcomes. And poor outcomes, like I said, in one case, waste money, right? Because we're not meeting the intended cause or the product or whatever it is. But when that poor outcome is in Health and Human Services, we should have zero tolerance. We should do everything we can to make sure that we transform our workforce. That at the end of the day, damn it, we know we've done everything. And if we're still not meeting our goals, then damn it, we got to blow it up and keep moving forward.
Sure.
Today, the people that are making the rules and regulate practically every industry in government never worked in that industry.
Sure. That's another thing, too.
And they don't have to live by the rules they create. I was able to study it. Again, it'll be my 40th year to see the cause and effect of that process of just taking advantage of human nature. I know we can bake in the things that don't naturally occur. And at the same time, I'll be at the front line fighting for better wages. I want fewer people. I want as many people that we can justify that have proven great value, but to create incentives that we have a compensation package that rewards for high outcomes. There's probably 10% of our workforce grossly underpaid. They're crazy dedicated. You can time into entrepreneurial type or just driven people. They're the ones that are making kind of keeping it together. The rest of it is just a process where they create work, and when they're done with that, they create more work for themselves. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it consumes resources and embeds ineffectiveness that has horrible, horrible outcomes at the end of the day, especially when you tie onto that human side, which to me is the only other reason for government.
So this is where the messaging, I think, is so important. So when I say it's like this self-eating cycle, when you say that there's not a corrective measure, understanding that there's disincentive when there's disincentive when the government is in charge and it is not influenced by what the people actually, because there's no one competing with the government, right? Like, I mean, let's just be honest.
Unelected.
And this is a core fundamental difference in where you think when you talk about what the government does, and someone might say, well, why can't the government solve this problem, right? Like, that's a very common thing that people will say. Why can't the government solve this?
Absolutely.
And the answer is the government's terrible at solving things.
Right.
The government's good at making a hard line to make sure that, here's a cliff that you don't fall off. But that's not solving a problem. That's just basically making sure that, the fewest amount of people try and, fall off the cliff or whatever, right? And that's the problem, is that you have to be able to have incentives of market influences, of meritocracy, some of these different things. But again, this is something that's lost on people unless you can actually break it down on a digestible level that people understand. Yeah. But the only way to do that is, like you said, you have to get connected. You have to have people in the communities that care about that message, and you have to be able to move forward.
And I'd argue, it's across everyone. You go into large government, Hennepin County, Minneapolis. There's largest in the states.
Budget of Hennepin County is.
And you look at the outcomes, and I've done a bunch of work, in the Black community from out-of-home placement, right? Mm. Foster care. And people think, it disproportionately affects them. It doesn't. Statistically, it might look like that. But they treat everybody equally poor.
Sure, yeah.
So it's and I'm one of the I've been the chief sponsor for the Easter Seals program, the Father Project, right? It's the only organization that supports men, mostly minority men, but they don't care who it is, and to go out and to try and make sure that it provides structure and the opportunity to go out and to have an active role in their lives, the lives of their children. But they got to work at it. And those are things that we've done and work hard at little piecemeal things. But, going to what government doesn't do much. The things that actually work in government are delivered by the private sector.
Yeah, 100% right.
And see, so that was the other half of my career. Selling business process outsourcers into government, federal level, state level, right? All of it, from entire agencies to technology to solutions. So I've been able to validate that. The things I just spoke about, and if you've heard the governor speak about what his goals are, I have, ever since he was, from 2 weeks from the time he was elected the first time, attempted to get an hour meeting with the guy. He was just reelected, and he still can't get that meeting.
Sure.
The only bipartisan thing he does is he doesn't talk to Republicans or Democrat, elected officials.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, Governor, if you want more of what the things that you want, I want to help you get there.
Sure.
Right? And we can all win. But we can't fix any of those things. All the technologies. Have you ever heard the Menlar's garbage and all that stuff? Yeah. Maybe say, it's broke. Again, it's not broken. We can't have good outcomes to any of those until we change the training structure about how we teach people what their jobs are on a continuous basis and the attachment to it. AK, you work in the private sector.
Yep.
Yep. If you underperform, what happens to you?
Well, you don't have a job anymore.
You mean it fixes itself? What if you're a really good worker, but you designed a crappy product? It'll fix itself.
Yeah.
At every level, bankruptcy is a corrective action. We have none of those things in government today. Yeah. And I would argue today we're moving further away from that, that we have many jobs today that are being posted and people that are being hired that don't have a single deliverable the day they were hired. Mm. And so when you look at all of these things that they're adding to it, it's like, how does that help us build roads? How does that help us take care of personal care? How do we provide better care? Our nursing home industry is collapsing, by the way. 23,000 people left their jobs and aren't coming back in nursing homes and group homes.
Oh, and so here's the thing, and I don't even know, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this. So my mom has been in a nursing home for 9 years. Okay, she's in a nursing home in Stillwater, mm-hmm. and I'm the eldest. And just actually earlier today, I had a care conference call. Mm-hmm. And we're just, checking on how things are going. And there was something, I'm not going to share exactly the details, but there was something that surprised me. And I had a question about medications that were being taken. And they said, well, according to this rule, we want to try and wean people off of certain medications. And I actually was taken back, and my wife and I were both on the call. And my wife called me afterwards. She's like, how did we not know this? I'm like, we are on every care conference call. I guess I just kind of assumed, because I didn't go through and look at like every single thing, because they've taken. I mean, she's alive. I talk to her every day. My sister actually works there, and so it got me thinking. And I think it is a government thing where they wanted to reduce a medication that she had been taking for 30 plus years, because she is a Medicaid recipient, right? So there's these little things like this, but I think that people need to try and have a better understanding. But here's what I wanted to kind of get your kind of thoughts and opinions on. When we look at the state of Minnesota as a whole, there's a lot of different potential of where things can go for the next election cycle, and we have places where we can start talking about. We're going to have a change in leadership potentially, right, with the MNGOP
we have
chair,
an election,
right? That's coming up.
Well, let's get quick hitters. Are you running for the Minnesota GOP chair?
I am not running for the Minnesota GOP chair.
Is there anybody you're going to put your support behind?
I think people should be begging David Hand to run and stay. I think when you look at David Hand architected the 4-year he started in 2012, spent 4 years to architect the win for the Minnesota Senate majority. He individually was defeated in 2016, but he won the majority. That work that he did and that plan, it took him 4 years, and they put forth the plan and executed and won the majority, and it kept us there for the last 6 years. I think I have a bias that I think anybody without being elected or serving is a great disadvantage to even understand what's going on. You can't teach what this entire process brings forth. And when you think about what he came into an environment that was less than zero, right? All highly competent staff have been all forced and chased out of this state to not work at the MNGOP from their previous administration. They had redistricting, which is a monumental effort. So trying to rebuild from less than nothing. Literally, they took the laptops, nothing. And then going to the point of getting through redistricting, moving into that, many of our entities are dissolved, so you have to really restructure all of them with the new boundaries. Takes time, lots of effort. And then you roll right into endorsing conventions all at the same time. And then the statewide constitutional office endorsing conventions. And then you get about 5.5 months to plan for an election. When you look at that, and we're in a cycle now. This cycle is the first time we've had the election in December. So that new chair gets almost a 2-year full cycle to focus and create plan and then focus on that for 2 years. Normally it's in May or June, later in the year. You're just getting your feet under you, and you got less than a year to really implement. And so I think he's fully capable. Is he perfect? Nope. I've yet to meet somebody perfect. I will be doing everything I can to help support the things we talked about, helping from the outside, and doing everything we can to make sure and push and pressure. I was going to bring in my suit coat about the 25 things that I had. I've probably given my when I ran for the chair speech 1,000 times since I stopped running for the chair.
Sure.
But it's all the right issues still. And so we need to make sure that David Hand understands them, that I think he does, and that he starts to build those teams and to put the focus on the areas where we think we need to do it and build an army. And again, I think bringing in all elected offices, I think we should challenge it. How do we bring through 4,000 people with walkbooks and an army on the ground that, one, if we had the money, couldn't afford to hire them because people wouldn't exist. They don't exist. But more motivated, and we win in every aspect of taking the local offices, making sure our quality of life is there, stopping bad ideas from being incubated locally, terminating those bad ideas they've already implemented, and then bringing a highly motivated team into the environment that's going to bring us the resources necessary to move forward. So
I think it's compelling. I personally like Senator Chairman. I'll call him Chairman Hand. I think he's a very nice gentleman. I, however, use the metric of what happened and why did it feel. It felt different from my perspective. I think you make a compelling argument, and maybe I'm not a state central delegate, so my opinion doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I would be curious to see. But it really is messed up how short a time there is, because it'd be preposterous for someone to be campaigning for re-election before a general election. So I think that the previous chair, Carnahan, I think she did this on purpose, and maybe
the state central. Yeah, and I'm not sure what but the state central delegates voted on it.
Oh, I know.
So,
I know. But I mean, yes, but it was at the direction of.
I agree.
Yeah. So there's that. Now, secondly, you have a new Senate minority leader, right? Mark Johnson from East Grand Forks.
That is correct.
That's right next to Grand Forks. I'm from North Dakota. What can we expect from Senator Johnson?
I think we were very happy that Mark stepped up. Mark came in the class that I did. I think, again, I like people's backgrounds. He's even though he's an attorney, but he owns a construction company, a concrete company. So he lays concrete all year or all summer. And so Jeremy Miller, Senator Gazelka set the bar high. Jeremy Miller set the bar even higher.
Sure.
And we're going to make sure that bar stays that way. Sure. And so he's going to have to work hard. We're going to be there to support him and make sure that we operate as a caucus and that we bring everybody into the fold and everybody continues to have the voice. And that in our caucus, our leader never acted outside of the parameters in which we set as a caucus.
Sure. That's what you mean, though it's different in the Senate than other caucuses.
I would argue all three other caucuses that didn't operate. There's no, you hear the garbage news, under the cover of darkness, right? The trifecta got together and created the terrible policy that you think you have. That didn't happen for us. Sure. And that hasn't happened since I arrived, at least for the last 6 years. And so everybody has a voice. We craft, as the leader, craft deals, right? I mean, it's final negotiations. You're not going to have 150 people in the room. But it's exactly what our caucus has set in priorities, and as well as guardrails in each of those parameters. And then if it moves outside or as things morph, you keep in constant contact, and it's going to take a lot of work for him because the bar has been set really high, but I think he's ready for it. We swapped up a couple people and put some new people on the leadership team as well. Yeah. I'm excited as well on the House. The House picked a new minority leader as well. Yeah. Lisa Demuth.
I'd never even heard of her. Actually, like the day of, just because Walter Hudson, I wanted to make a funny tweet. And I was looking to see, because I love to troll leftists, especially racial identitarians. And
did you read Boyce's blog, man?
Yeah.
Did you know Walter Hudson's black?
Yeah. And so because of that, I was going to write
They had to tell us. And they kind of said, oh, by the way, Walter Hudson, he's black.
Right. And so because I was trying to make a pithy reply, and then Walter had tweeted, you might want to tell this, and then he linked to her and is like, you might want to tell her that she's not the first Republican since 1970 to be elected to the state house. And I was like, who is this? And then I looked it up and I'm like, how do I not know that?
Yeah.
But I don't live in Cold Spring or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
She served at Jeff Howe.
Okay.
Jeff Howe, the Senate. That's
and see, I know who Jeff Howe is.
Yeah.
It's just I never met Lisa, and I'd be awesome to be able to have her on the show.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But I wanted to ask, are like quick twitch? Is there 3 things that you think that Minnesotans should be aware of calling their state reps, their state senators about what the DFL caucus wants to bring through? There's like top 3 bills that you're like, watch out. These are, yeah.
I think they're going to move on abortion, right?
Okay.
Do they? I doubt they even have the votes, at least in the Senate, to do something like that. They're going to continue to focus on that. Second Amendment, right? You've seen all the crazy bills. I think the Senate Democrats with Kerry Dietzig at the helm will likely moderate that.
Okay.
I really do. I'm hopeful for Minnesota that she does, because you've seen the crazy stuff. Every crazy idea was passed off the Minnesota House floor over the last 4 years, right? Anti-police, anti-family, anti-American.
So you think there'll be some actual fighting from the DFL Senate on some of the stuff that's going to come from the House?
I do.
Really?
I think there'll be plenty of, again, the composition of their 34 to move even on their core priorities, because they aren't going to move far enough to the other side. I think there'll be plenty of issues that they're going to struggle to maintain 34. If you look at the composition over the last 3 election cycles of those that, and to me the most kind of the depressing side is that you could always battle the ideas, but the institution is respected and cherished, as well as the Constitution. That's changed. And so when you look at organizations that say, well, we just support constitutional base. Well, that makes you conservative. No, the Constitution used to be a bipartisan, but now it's become a partisan position.
Yeah.
And so to see that kind of disregard for the institution, and the institution is designed to emote behavior and to vet ideas at an amazing level, and they just have no respect for that.
So, Senator, I think I know you have seen the images that have popped up on our TV here.
Our producer really wants us to talk about it.
I was wondering if you even looked up, because there's a couple images and questions that have popped up about Trump.
Yeah.
And I want to get your view on it. I kind of know your view on it already, but sure. What's your view on the big announcement that happened?
I think President Trump, right? I think he feels. You think about what he went through, in spite of his own government working against him. Mm-hmm. Every single thing that they have claimed he did, they didn't do. Right? It was proven. Does everybody even know that yet? They don't. Right, because the media has suppressed practically everything. Some of them come out now, the Biden, right, all the garbage. But the internal tax, I think it took them 4 years to figure out where the real challenge was. I think they had an uninformed, greater trust in government.
Yeah, sure.
And I would argue that trust was, we think there's portion malicious in its intent and delivery. I would argue the ineffectiveness can look malicious.
Sure.
And I think the vast majority is ineffectiveness, which appears more malicious than the actual malicious intent that we've seen, right? Think about all the stuff that they've done.
That which cannot be attributed to, ignorance can be attributed to malice, right? So, honestly, there's probably more ignorance than malice. And I think that's true for a lot of people, because I don't think that there's a lot of evil people that are public servants.
But I think in that level, when you look at the people there and how long they've been there in the true power and how they've acted out against a president without evidence. In fact, they've helped manufacture evidence. And so that's all been proven to be false. The premise of everything they've done is impeachments, everything is false. He's a Brooklyn, New York guy, right? Is a culture. We just talked about cultures change every 20 miles. He's brash, he's braggadocious. But I think he was the only guy that could have done what he did in 2016, and he represents the hardworking legal U.S. citizen, period. He simplified every argument, every debate. He was working for the hardworking legal U.S. citizen, and the opposition party is working for everybody except the hardworking legal U.S. citizen, regardless of the topic. And so he made the media call it who they were. Will he be the one that motivates more people to work against him? Yeah, I think he will. Could he truly be presidential? I don't know that he has. If he has that in him, if he did, he would be unstoppable. And I think that's what they fear. Because all he'd have to do is stop personal attacks. I think that was part of a self-preservation type thing, and Brooklyn, more personality than anything. But look at the vicious attacks that no other, probably Lincoln. I mean, there's a couple that have been attacked equally. But would I pick a dream ticket? If you're looking at long term, you pick a Trump DeSantis. The problem is egos get in the way, right? anybody, but think about it, anybody who would want to serve at that level. I know the sacrifice my family makes and how hurtful they are, how hurt they get when they see things in the attacks against us. It's nothing at our level compared. Go to a congressman. I've seen what it's like. I've had that wrath for 3 or 4 days at a crack. To put his family through that for the rest of their lives, they will always be that family. You don't do that easily. So it takes part of ego, right, to be able to do that. I think he believes he's truly been wronged, and he has been. Can he motivate people, and can he bring new voters in? I'd love to see a Trump DeSantis. You got to be looking for 12 years.
Here's 2 things I want to jump in on. So I watched back Trump's announcement speech. He did not once during that speech attack any individual on a personal basis. He did not even talk about 2020 being stolen from him, which I thought was great. And I heard an analysis by Michael Knowles who said that people were saying that DeSantis is Trump with tact, right? And so I think that actually is making Trump have to have tact so he can defeat that thing that's going after him.
Well, I agree, man.
Do you think he can win? Do you think he could? Trump in 2024 can win.
All of the things that we talked about, it's about turn out your base. And so how do we motivate? What are the dollars available? Right? Because that's part of it. Media, just bombardment of media. It is effective. It affects me because it's all they hear. They tend to believe it. And I don't care who you are. If that's all you see, it starts to move your thought process. And think about it. They convinced in 2020 more people to vote against every one of your core beliefs because they got people to hate someone personally, right, who they don't know.
But do you think that same tactic, why wouldn't it work this time if it worked last time?
I agree. I think they're going to be, right, what will change in the ability to go out and to do that? And look what they're already doing. They're going to do the same thing to DeSantis or whoever that candidate is. Already they're talking about DeSantis is far more dangerous because
that's what the Lincoln Project said.
He's a far more capable Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that's probably true, right? He's smart, but Trump also brings I love DeSantis. He's done what everybody wants people to do, right? Don't let the institution drive what you do. Run safe. All those types of things. He's running for what the people want. It literally seems like it makes sense, common sense, not stupid. Use the medical science, not the political science, right? Yeah. How do you mobilize? How do you energize people? And look what he's done. He's doing everything that everybody would hope. And that's the same thing that people wanted out of Trump. And so I don't know how you keep him out. I don't want to see a bloodbath between the two. But I think you're right. Be as presidential as you're physically possible, and he becomes really scary to the Democrats.
Yeah, it's hard. So I think with this is just how I feel. In 2016, I didn't vote for Trump. Minnesota almost went to Trump, and maybe that's because Hillary Clinton was on the ballot, but that's the closest that a Republican has got to winning the state since 72. And in 2020, it was a completely different bag because why? Let's be very candid. When you have 2.1 million people vote absentee, and through no fault, you can get low information voters that say, yeah, Trump is a bad man. And people are like, dude, I'm not even going to vote. And they're like, no. You just have to just sign this thing and I'll take this ballot for you. So I think that was working against Trump. But we talked about this off air, that Minnesota's laws in regards to ballot harvesting is, it's relatively rigid. I think it's 3 ballots that you can harvest per person.
Yeah, that's only if you have somebody that's interested in enforcing it.
Sure.
Oh wait,
sure.
who is that here?
But
our Attorney General. I don't know that he thinks
I personally think that there are people that are afraid of Trump in Minnesota,
Yeah.
that feel that he will drive out higher voter against him and everything like that. But I think that with Republicans taking the House and their conference they had today of all of the investigations that are going to be coming out, I think it's going to be very difficult for Biden to walk out clean on this one. Because he's made so many statements and absolutes that he didn't know. I had no involvement, and so I think it's going to be interesting. I personally, I would support Trump. I lean,
Over DeSantis?
I lean DeSantis. So if DeSantis right now announced, which I don't think he will, if he announced right now, I would lean DeSantis because he has all the things I like about Trump, but he has the tact, and also he actually formulates his attacks on the culture front. I think in a much better way than
think
than
about
Trump
what
does.
he did. He was right. Trump did the same. Think about immigration, right? He did everything he could to the illegal immigration. And so what did he start to do? He started to let's shift those buses.
Yeah, let's fly people.
I think he
to
picked
one of his-
sanctuary cities, and they went, "Whoa, wait a second."
Yeah.
And that's my hope too. Is I would love everybody to live by the virtues in which they're voting for today.
Sure, yeah,
From
yeah.
energy to power, right? We all want clean power. We all want great cars.
Let's do nuclear, baby. Let's get it rolling.
Fuel economy, right? All those things, but you need to live by them, and nobody was willing to do that. But Trump did it, and he laid the foundation, and then DeSantis started to make surgical strikes.
Yeah.
And says Martha Vineyards look pretty hot out there, and Abbott start right, and it's sad, they look out there, and it's humans, right, but. We've created human tragedy by not having a border, and that's led and sponsored by our federal government, right? The policies matter, and when they say, "Hey, all are welcome," look at the death and destruction, and we cannot take everybody. We need to figure out.
Well, did you hear what Schumer just said?
I didn't.
Schumer just said that because we have our collapsing birth rates and we have a worker shortage, we need to pass amnesty for 11 or so million people that are here.
So those that came this month,
right? So this is he literally said that yesterday, and that's just banal. We never got your opinion on Trump, man.
Well, I don't think you could win Minnesota. I don't think. I think the party needs to move forward, and I would be supporting somebody along the lines of DeSantis instead of Trump, just because of what you said, Senator.
Well, what if DeSantis doesn't run?
What the senator said, where you need somebody more presidential. If you're looking to do a bet on this, I would be happy to do that later on.
We're so far
Jai,
out.
I don't think you want to go to the same steakhouse.
I'm going to make sure there's no Groupons, because if he wins, it's going to be a Groupon date. So I'm not going to do that.
Next time,
but now I know, like the Groupon, I had to have 4 people for the one that I bought. Also, someone had asked a question about the sanctimonious. Let's be honest, that's probably the weakest attack that I've ever heard come out of Trump's mouth. I think it's just Trump trying to just make sure that he's the alpha dog. And desanctimonious is, let's be honest, the worst diss ever. And the other diss I've heard is that he's short. I don't know how tall DeSantis is. I heard he's 5'9", and Trump is 6'2" or 6'3" or something like that, which is hilarious to me.
Well, it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, and I'm here for it.
We'll have a lot to talk about.
I'm all about competition. I'm not a Trump bobo that's like, Trump can do no wrong. But I will say this. When the media and the establishment lies about Trump, I would rather be on the side of being quiet about the things I disagree with Trump than instead of having to fall in on the side of people that are lying because they want power. Yeah. I'd rather shut up and not be on that side than to help pile on so I get associated with those people. And the reason why is because in 2016, I had a banner on my Facebook page that said, "Never Trump," in 2016, because I was like, Trump is not a conservative. He's a nationalist. And while I agree with some of the stuff he says too many things that are not conservative principle. And then and I voted Evan McMullen, which is the worst vote of my life, but I did. And then I took it down because I actually sat and I watched his policy go by. And I was like, oh, these are good policies. Oh, dang. I misunderstood things.
Yeah.
So
Middle East peace. Yeah. What?
Yeah. Who wants that? I mean, who wants, being able to sit down and stop terrible things from happening?
Yeah.
Who wants more of that? Well, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, man.
You got.
Come back on the show anytime.
Do you got anything coming up that you want people to know about? Is there, any events, anything like that?
We're just rolling out. We've got we've continued to represent. Right, it doesn't matter whether you're majority or minority. We're the voice for our citizens in our district, and so we're going to continue to work on and represent our district. And no major events. We're trying to figure out. Well, there is a major. We're all moving in the Capitol, by the way.
Yeah, you have to move, right?
Everybody packing up and moving, and so there'll be this whole shuffle. So it'll be a couple months, probably 6 weeks of kind of organized chaos or just transition, and then rolling out committee assignments and making sure that we focus on. One of the things I'm most proud about is I'm the chair of the Legislative Audit Commission, hoping to stay on it. You'll be the vice chair. It's really the voice and it's really the eyes and ears of our citizen and our legislature. And somebody asked about the nonprofits out there.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that's the agency that's providing some scrutiny over those and to get us some insight. That's a political machine. The reason we have so many of them, that's how the Democrats fund their political machine, through nonprofits. So,
yeah. It's very elusive, right?
It is. You're going to see a lot of work come out of there. A lot of things, a lot of investigations going on, feeding our future, which we could probably come back and do a segment on both of the
which we should.
Election fraud and ballot harvesting out of Senator Fate's office, and then that investigation is still going on in the FBI, as well as feeding our future is probably going to take our legislative auditor a couple of years to really vet that entire program, who's involved, right? You've seen 50 indictments. There's probably going to be a heck of a lot more.
Sure.
And then you're probably going to find that most of them are likely tied to many other nonprofits.
Interesting how that works.
Right? How that works. And many of them, they're contributing directly to Democrats. And
weird.
Almost exclusively. And so those are the things that it really is a full cycle of crime, and it's using our taxpayer dollars. I've said to everybody, you can probably tie almost 40% of election campaign spending back to your own taxpayer dollars, feeding themselves. Not feeding our future. They've been feeding themselves. I think if you looked at the total overall fraud, if we could put the resources to it, feeding our future is $500 million. That would be dwarfed by what happens on an annual basis.
I wouldn't, there's so many different routes that we could go. We could go hours and hours about FTX and all the money that's went into like 100% Democrats. But we will have you back on for sure, even just to get legislative updates about the state of things,
anytime, man.
Just because you're awesome to talk to, and I truly appreciate it coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's always weird because I want to give you the respect of the title. The people of your district, sent you to represent them. So I call you Senator Koran, but I'll call you Mark.
I'm just happy with Mark. Right? I am. I really do. We do all really respect the title, and you're blessed to be here. But we're just your neighbor.
Yeah.
And people don't. They think we're just you become some 8-headed dragon or quadra. And it's like, no, we're just people.
Well, you have one other big thing you're not even talking about, and that's do you have the best Christmas light display in your neighborhood?
5,000 people who drive through my front yard every year, and so between now and Sunday after Thanksgiving, I'll be putting in 14 to 16 hours a day trying to get that thing up and lit. Election season puts a little crimp on it.
Maybe we'll have to do a short video in front of
we got
You go on Facebook, go to Koran Family Christmas, and you'll be able to see some videos and see what it looks like, man.
Awesome.
I support 3 of our nonprofits, or not nonprofits.
I was like, you got some nonprofits.
No, man.
Bring it on to Black and Blue.
Three youth organizations. So Navy Sea Cadets, the local Boy Scout troop, and the FFA of Chisago Lakes. They come and help me set up. So I have about 40 people.
Awesome.
For 4 days, and we collect donations for them, and they all put. They get all the donations, 100% of the money. So last year we got them $6,000. The year before we got them $11,000.
That's cool.
And it's good for them. It helps me, and it's just a great community thing. And it's like, and it doesn't hurt me politically. I've been doing it for 54 years.
Yeah.
even I'm a Republican, they always say, well, he must not be a jerk for at least 6 weeks out of the year.
At least 6 weeks. At least 6 weeks. Yeah, man. Thank you again so much for coming on. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure that you guys do a couple of things for us.
That's where it started at.
There it is, man.
That's
where
the
it
start
started.
right there.
Number one, make sure that you guys like this video. Make sure that you share this video on, not just on the platform you're watching this. If you're watching on YouTube, take the link, share it on all of your socials. Also, make sure to go and find like a favorite video or clip that you think is really cool or a post. Make sure to like that. And then also follow us on our social. We do now have an Instagram at Black and Blue Podcast MN is what our Instagram is. And you can also follow me on TikTok at AK Kamara. Officer Jai is at Officer Jai on all of his socials. Stay connected with us. Because when we drop new episodes, we want to make sure that you guys share it, whether it's just the audio. And without your help and without your support, this means nothing. But that's what we have. Thank you so much for listening to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. I am AK Kamara.
I'm Jai Hansen.
See you next time.
Take care.
It's all that anti-Trump stuff you were saying earlier.